Svenja. This is our office in Fuerteventura, and this is our first episode of Digital Nomads. And each week we are trying to call in a different person who's based out of Fuerteventura, living in Fuerteventura and doing something over here, or moved from somewhere over here recently, or has been over here for a bit.
Yes.
So welcome, thank you for doing this with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm originally from Germany, but I've lived 7 years in Dublin before I moved here. And then I moved here about a year and a half ago. And when I was still living in Dublin, I was working in the tech area, in the tech space as a project manager. And then I came here basically just on holidays for 2 weeks. And
that's amazing. I've heard this so many times. Like a lot of people who've come on holidays and they somehow just decide to like stay back.
Yeah.
So how did that shift happen for you?
Yeah, I knew before, like it was kind of in the time of my life, I knew I wanted to kind of shift careers and kind of move into a completely different space. And I had been teaching yoga on the side before, so I knew it could be an option to kind of move into that space, but never had in mind to be like a full-time yoga teacher. And then I came here, stayed for 2 weeks, had 6 weeks of holidays in total, and I wanted to go back to Germany initially. But then with COVID and cases rising in Germany, I was like, okay, maybe not the best time, so I just stay here. And then I spoke with my manager at the end of 6 weeks and was like, okay, can I work remotely from here for a while? Because it was still possible as a project manager to do that. And so I stayed here till the end of the previous year. And then January last year, they wanted me to basically to come back to Dublin out of taxation reasons, which I totally understand. But at that time, I couldn't imagine going back to Ireland into kind of lockdown in winter and quite rainy weather at that time. And so I decided to quit my job. And I initially wanted to kind of just take a sabbatical on my own terms and be like, okay, I find myself, I decide what I want to do. But then I kind of started teaching a bit of yoga here and there in some of the surf villas I have here. And at some point I kind of had this, this motivation, inspiration to just, okay, if I do it, then I want to do it right. And so I started looking for a space, which I thought would take weeks or months to find a space to teach, especially for TU, it's quite small. And then I just reached out to a few people who are quite well connected within the village. And within half an hour, someone got back to me and was like, okay, I actually have a space for you. Okay, so it's getting real. And then how everything started.
Beautiful. Yeah. So how, usually when you have this realization that you want to switch jobs and you want to do something that's your true calling or something that really fits well with you. So, especially in terms of yoga, when did you decide that you wanted to, do something that gives to the people, that gives back to the community in a way? How did you have that sort of moment of like realization, for example?
I think I felt that early on. I think it was always a bit there, and I know that kind of for me as a value, purpose is quite important, especially when it comes to work. And I was missing that in the work I was doing. I was enjoying like my work I was doing. Was in general was great. The people were great, but I kind of felt that something was missing. And we had the opportunity to work with coaches in my previous job, and so I worked with them, and kind of that really helped me to kind of develop a bit more what is it actually that I really want to do. And so it became really clear that I want to have something that has a deep purpose for me, like a meaning in what I'm doing. And I love to be around people. I'm more of an introvert, but if it's kind of in a certain framework, I love to kind of give to people. I love to kind of have this interactions, energy and exchange. And I know that something like yoga has given me so much, yoga meditation in my own life, that I would love to share a bit from what I've learned on the path.
That's beautiful.
That's
beautiful. Yeah, because also like in terms of the island, for example, like a lot of people come here and who are remotely working or like moving over here. But do you think, in terms of inspiration, Fuerteventura has so many things going on. But is there some part of the island that inspired you to move here, to live here, to pursue this practice or to start this practice? Cotillo is beautiful. It has like so many different sections going on.
I think for me it was one part is really the community they have in Cortijo. Like for me, it felt it was really easy to get into a certain type of community, and much easier, and it was much faster to grow that than what I had over 7 years in Dublin, for example. And so that was one of the things that kind of really stayed with me. I was like, okay, this is actually really nice and really welcoming, really open. And I think the nature here in general as well, I think it's kind of very rough, it's very empty, there's not much happening, but I think that gives you space for yourself.
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of Fuerteventura, and I think if you're equipped with your own little tools to kind of deal with that and handle that well, then I think it gives you yourself a lot of beautiful space to develop, to heal, to kind of work through things. And so,
absolutely. Yeah. Like for example, let's say yoga. Like yoga is a huge topic. There are so many different forms of yoga. There's Ashtanga, Hatha. You practice Yin yoga, right?
So what I'm teaching is Yin yoga, or kind of a bit of variation of Hatha yoga.
Okay, but Yin yoga, isn't it something like, from what I know, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've heard is like this ancient sort of philosophy that follows energies, and whatever kind of energies are there in your body, and if there are blockages, it guides you through these poses and these accumulations that you can remove and unblock through the poses and through the meditations and a bit of all of that, right?
I mean, yoga in general is a bit around that, I would say. But I think Yin yoga, especially, and I think it's kind of where the Yin and the yoga comes together, because it is, it takes with it as well some of the kind of traditional Chinese medicine and the meridian line system that we have underneath. And so when we go into the different poses, this idea is that we stimulate either by stretching or by compression different of those meridian lines. Those meridian lines, which you might know from acupuncture, for example, as well. And so this is the idea. And each of those meridian lines is connected to different organs, is again connected and has this idea of being connected with different emotions. And so if it's in balance and out of balance, we might kind of shift into one or the other area. And so that's kind of how, if you want to go down that road, that's kind of something that kind of really can help you balance out those areas as well. And so the way I teach is that when I sequence classes, I do take that into consideration. And at the same time, though, I know this is not something that everybody, has access to. It's kind of accessible for everyone. So that's kind of one level, and there's another level that's a pure physical one where you just know, okay, I get a good stretch, I go deeper into the fascia, the connective tissues, and I create more mobility over time. I think another really great benefit of Yin yoga for me is that it opens the door for a lot of people to meditation, because I think it's not meditation as such, but it is a meditative practice, because you hold poses for 3 to 6, 7, 8 minutes. And if you're in those poses, plus you have a certain stretch, a bit of a stress on certain parts of your body, you really need to kind of connect with your breath, you really need to kind of work into your body. It gives you this opportunity to always get your mind back into the present moment. And so this is kind of, for me, a bit roughly what Yin yoga is about.
Beautiful. And what about like the meditations are mainly focusing on the breath, or because I have done Vipassana, for example, which is the 10-day meditation, intensive meditation,
very intense,
where the whole process, how it is in Vipassana, where they make you focus your breath on one part of your body, which is like Anapana, and they make you trying to make your breath, your awareness more stronger by focusing on one sensation and observing what more sensations are coming. How do you feel? Do you feel hot? Do you feel cold? How long is the breath from one nostril? How short is the breath from another? So slowly, like what they taught us was, with these observations about your breath and on your breath and on the sensations, you try to remove the impurities of your mind. Or like the sankharas, as they called it, they keep coming up and they keep like getting almost eradicated by the observation and your stronger practice in a period of time. So is there the meditation that you are practicing in Yin yoga, is it something similar, or is it more visualization?
I think it really depends on the teacher. I think everybody kind of takes different things in. I think some teachers kind of just give a lot of silence, and so it's up to everyone individually to do that. What I like to do is to kind of guide people back into their bodies and to maybe in a similar way, but not as targeted, and sometimes guide them to where the stretch is and notice, okay, how do your muscles tense up around the stretch? How can you release it? So this type of kind of focus. Sometimes it's purely just staying with your breath. And what I usually also invite people to do is to kind of just see what in general is present in your body. Do you feel heat arising? Do you feel so like kind of really like not as focused of a body concentration as what you were describing, but a bit more like a wider area, but always going back into your body and staying like that.
Creating that sort of self-awareness from the body parts to the mind. Exactly.
And also, especially because from a yin perspective, what we say is that because we stimulate different meridian lines, but also if you just stimulate different parts of our areas, we're meant to hold something like anger, frustration is meant to sit more around your hips, and like it's more stress around your shoulders. And when we release those, when we work into those, there's this idea that maybe they might come up again, maybe we process them a bit more. And so kind of just observing all of that, and maybe also giving them space or giving ourselves the space to hold whatever is there, whatever emotions are there. And I think this is something we can use in our day-to-day lives as well.
Absolutely.
Where we often have to press away certain emotions and like, oh no, this is not coming in handy right now, I can't handle that, I don't want to deal with that, and then you put it away. Instead, kind of giving ourselves a space, and then it's also okay to sit with more challenging sensations. If that is a stretch, if that is an emotion that might be coming up, and just giving that space and let it be there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I had read about this somewhere where they said that whenever you have a strong emotion, if you are stressed or anxious or angry, it reacts in your body.
Yeah.
It goes to one part of your body.
Yeah.
Like the other day, my sister had a little problem with her eye.
Yeah.
And the other day I had a similar problem with my eye where there was a sty that was growing.
Yeah.
So I tried to Google about it. I'm like, okay, I should check what's going on over here. And somewhere it spoke about like bottled up emotions or bottled up something like anger or fear or anxiety. Something that goes and gets accumulated in your body. And that is where you have the self-awareness comes in, where you try to understand where is that coming from.
Yes.
To release it from the body, so it's not staying inside your body. Exactly. So that's why you have yoga and meditation or writing or any sort of therapy that can release that emotion out of your body.
Exactly.
Do you think it's something like that when the things get accumulated in your body and it turns into, I don't know, something bigger in the long term?
I mean, I'm not a medical professional, so I can't give like any detail, but for me personally, and I can talk about my personal experience, I have had rheumatoid arthritis since I've been a little kid, and I've kind of had periods where it kind of flared up again every time around times where there was a lot of stress in my life, a lot of personal emotional stress in my life. And so I started digging into that, and I kind of started reading into it, and there's someone who's called Gabor Mate. I don't know if you've heard of him. Gabor Mate.
Okay.
And he has written a book. It's kind of like the body keeps the score, and then I need to go back. That's one thing we can maybe cut out, because he has written a book, and I always forget the main title. It's basically about, the subtitle is The Cost of Hidden Stress, and it's basically about how your body, depending on what kind of patterns or personalities you have, how you kind of tend to suppress certain parts of who you are, then might kind of, in the end, ultimately create certain illnesses. And so he had been working in a palliative care clinic in Vancouver, as leading that, and he saw people with like terminal illnesses coming in, and he kind of made this connection of certain personality types and behavioral patterns being connected with certain type of illnesses. And so from there he kind of went more into research, he kind of brought together different types of researchers, and I found that incredibly interesting. He spoke a bit also about rheumatoid arthritis and how this is something where obviously your immune system kind of targets your own body, and where he says that that's often when people kind of do not like swallow their own anger, turning their anger against themselves. And I kind of like this comparison, and when I go into that and kind of just reflect on it, I'm like, oh yeah, I can kind of see that. And so for me, ultimately, this is obviously not an accurate science, but overall I can say I personally, from my experience, I do believe that there's a connection between how I handle my emotions and how reflected and mindful I am about things and what kind of illnesses I might struggle with. Anything that has to do with inflammation, autoimmune disease, those kind of things, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like mindfulness in today's time and age, especially after COVID.
Yeah.
You know, when we all were in isolation in a completely different scenario that never really existed. So a lot has changed, work has changed, everything has changed for mostly everyone now.
Yeah.
So how important do you think mindfulness is in these changing times? Like, you know, how would you adapt? How would you recommend someone to practice mindfulness daily, for example?
I think it's super important, and I think mindfulness also has to do with kind of this connection with ourselves and kind of not losing that. And I think we often, and I think it worked very well for many people for a lot of years to kind of be in our little hamster wheel and just kind of keep going and keep working and stay in this environment, just work kind of things we need to do, home things that we need to do, maybe taking care of kids, maybe taking care of family, whatever it is, and we just work and we just function. I think COVID kind of made us all stop and pause.
Right.
And I think for some people, a lot of things came up during that time. And I think things that kind of stayed underneath the surface now had more space to actually pop up. And it's just kind of got stronger what might have already been there. And so I think for a lot of us, it's an opportunity that we had this pause and things came up because we can now work through them instead of just passing them away. And I think mindfulness in general, I personally really, like for me, my kind of little tool is meditation, and the other one is breath work actually.
Right.
Because I think it's something that is more accessible for a lot of people than saying, oh, meditation.
Right.
And if you just go into like some pranayama, some breathing exercises, you have something to do, and you just do that for 5 minutes, and it's easier for you to count your breath in a certain rhythm, rather than to be like, oh, I need to meditate and I need to sit still kind of situation. And so I think, and at the same time, breath is something that has such an impact on our nervous system immediately, because it's one of those only kind of core functions of our bodies that we can actually control, that is automated, but also we control it, and so we can use that to stimulate our nervous system. So 5 minutes of sometimes just conscious breathing, conscious balance breathing can help you so much to just check in with yourself, take a deep breath, or just taking a deep breath actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Because each one to its own, right? Whatever works for you might work for someone else, might not work for another. So you have to check in with yourself and see what works for you better. For example, I remember in India when I was doing this meditation course, they taught us this technique called, what was it called? It was called Adhishtan or something like that, which is basically translates to self-determination. So if you're sitting in a meditative posture with cross-legged, you have thoughts. Whenever you're sitting in meditation, you have so many thoughts. And initially, of course, it's very difficult. But also when you are sitting in one posture, you feel tired, you're not able to sit in that for a longer period of time. So what are you doing? You're constantly fidgeting, changing, scratching. So what they taught us in this technique was to see, okay, I'm feeling like I'm getting tired, my legs are getting tired in the same posture, I need to change. So acknowledge that there's pain in that body part or whatever, and then just let it be. And then just go back to your meditation, just go back to your breath work, just go back to your sensation. And I was like, okay, but my leg is like dying, like I can't feel any sensation. So my teacher told me, like, just sit with it. And after like 20 minutes, it automatically just disappears. So for me, sometimes this technique works, even in like daily sort of work stress or whatever. I know that, okay, this is a problem. Okay, I have to resolve it, but I don't know how to resolve it. I'm just going to sit with it. So similar things, I think, sometimes just sit with the emotions, sit with how you're feeling, see how you feel, and it goes. Like and anything that rises goes down, and anything that goes up comes down. It's
kind of this idea of ever-changing things. No?
Absolutely.
Like nothing stays permanent. I think this is something to remind ourselves of as well when we go through challenging times. When there is something that feels like it's never going to go away, and like it feels overwhelming. Just becoming aware that it is something that will pass. And I think the more we let emotions pass through us, or physical sensations as well, the more they can actually change and shift and maybe trigger out at some point.
Absolutely. Like for example, let's say digital nomads. The concept of digital nomads is something that's not very recent, but it has been applied to very well now after the post-COVID, where there's so many people who are moving to the island for remote working, or companies are sending them over here to work, or people who just come here and they love the island and they just decide if they can work out of here. So what do you think about the concept of digital nomads in today's time and age, and how do you think it's going to evolve over a period of time now that COVID is still there, but slowly, you know, cities are opening, countries are opening, travel is opening up. How do you think its work is going to change for us?
I find it interesting, because I've worked obviously in a company where we had offices where remote work was possible for like a couple of weeks, depending on the manager, but it was not a thing that was encouraged necessarily. And the company that I work for, they shifted completely, and so they don't have offices anymore at all, and they only have so-called studios where they have like team building, team gathering things, but they don't have any desk where you could work from. They do have a bit of support for if you want to go into like any of those bigger co-working spaces, but that's basically it. And I've seen that a lot of people are thriving on that. They love it. They want to go abroad. At the same time, I also had a few colleagues of mine that I'm still in contact with. They're like, I really hate not having my colleagues around me. I really would love to see them, and so I think so that's why for me personally, I would be like, yes, I think it will change significantly. We will travel more. We will kind of be abroad more. But I think it really depends on the people. I think there are a lot that really enjoy actually staying in one place, staying kind of wherever they feel comfortable, wherever they have a connection, they're like tight bonds with like people around them, maybe family. But I think for those of us who are very keen to travel, to go abroad, I think it just gives a lot more independence, and I think a lot of more companies need to kind of adapt and adjust more and more to that, to kind of make sure that they get the type of workforce that they actually need and want. Because I think a lot of workers and a lot of friends that I have here so around me, they say when they look for new jobs, they're like, but only if I can work remotely and I can be completely independent from where I work. So
it's a great new option that has popped out.
Totally.
And like you said, you were living in Dublin and in Germany, somewhere in Germany.
I'm originally from Germany, close to Hanover.
Okay, so you know, like living in cities, almost all your life, and then shifting to an island, shifting to a complete different island in Spain. Like how? Because usually a lot of people ask, you know, how are you working on an island? Are you guys even working? Like what's going on? Are you going to a beach all the time? Although we have a lot of work going on. Like it wasn't just because we're living on an island. It's like so. How would you describe this shift of like working in a city and working on an island?
I think for me it's about the nature, like because it's not only island but also because it's such a small population here in such a small village. So it's basically for me it's more about moving from a big city to moving into a little village. Basically, that's how it feels. And I think for me, I feel I'm much more connected with myself. We have the option to be more connected with ourselves and and with nature. I think you have just this option to kind of go surfing every day if you wanted to, and you can kind of go for your hikes, and I just walk 5 minutes, I'm on the beach, you know, and that's something that I wouldn't have in a city, even though Dublin is on the coast, and I only need to walk literally 15 minutes, so that's a bit of a pattern for me how I choose my houses, 15 minutes view to the coastline, but still it felt very different because you're not right away in nature. You still have your houses around you, you feel like a lot of people around you, so you don't have this, I don't know, I really struggle to kind of describe that, but it is you feel you have more of a balance. And I think for me personally, also the shift to come here and the change in careers completely, the big difference as well is that I can integrate my work more into my general life, so it doesn't feel those are my working hours and this is my private life hours, but I feel like it's my life, and I did decide every day how I spend my time and my energy. If it is on like personal development today, is it into marketing for my studio, is it I teach another private class today, is it so this is kind of, and it feels like it all flows into each other. I'm on the beach or I'm surfing, I check my phone, I quickly reply to a few emails of people who want to come and take private lessons with me, anything like that, so it kind of all flows into each other. So if someone asks me how many hours do you work each week, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know actually. So this is kind of for me what has changed I think the most. At the same time, I must say, from like if you want to work, and I think think you have all the amenities here that you can have. You have the co-working spaces, you have offices, you have inspiring people around you. So I think there are more and more people coming here that actually have really interesting perspectives on lives, on work, on everything, which is really interesting to kind of have those exchanges. I see that in my studio because more and more people are coming in. They're like, okay, I'm here for like 3 months, I'm here for half a year or anything like that, and having conversations with them after the classes is super nice. And the co-working spaces we have are quite nice. But here we have now one as well, which is beautiful. I'm like, oh, how can this is the thing, like on an island you don't expect that. You don't expect a certain standard, but then when you go there and you go into this co-working space, it's just like walking back into one of those big tech offices back home, just with a bit more like boutique version of that.
Right.
Yeah.
That is so well put.
Yeah.
That is so bang on. Like the description is perfect.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
So what is the studio called in Cotillo?
Sea Inside. So my studio is Sea Inside Studio.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
it's like at the sea and then inside. Yeah.
Right. And where exactly is it in Cotillo?
It's kind of close to the main square.
Okay.
Do you know where the Riders bike shop is, or the Riders surf shop?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically if you go a tiny bit further and then on the left you kind of see it. Yeah.
Amazing. We're gonna visit one of the days.
And that,
appointment for the class.
Yeah.
But what would be your suggestion for like people who are looking for a career switch, for example, coming from tech and then getting more into like conscious living? So what would be your because it's really hard, because I faced that in my career many times. I studied something and I worked in something, and then I realized that I want to do this and I want to do that, and there's this sort of societal rule that okay, you've studied engineering, so you should be working as an engineer, or you have studied law, then you should be working as a lawyer, or I don't know, So what would be your advice to people who are finding themselves into this sort of a phase of rethinking, of reanalyzing, of deciding how they should be working or what they want to work in, or the switch?
I mean, I've gone through different phases as well in my life. I've studied tourism management, initially never worked in tourism, and so those kind of situations, and obviously from tech now as a project manager, now as a yoga teacher. I think what helped me most is to kind of really sit down. You can do that by yourself. There's a lot of questions around that online, or you find a coach or maybe a therapist, whatever works best for you, and kind of really go into this values. What are my values? What am I kind of running on? What is kind of crucial for me that those values are there in my work life? And so for me, I always say it's a yoga studio, but I think there could have been other things that I could have been doing that would make me equally as content and happy in what I'm doing, as long as my personal values are met. And I think for me, purpose is a big one. I think this kind of connection with people is a big one, and that I kind of have this feeling of supporting others in their development, but also independence, so being my own boss, and and I need a lot of diversity in what I'm doing. And so those are like a few cornerstones that I define for myself, and then opening your eyes. Like what is it? What is there? What kind of meets those criteria? So this is, I think, how I went about that. And I think kind of knowing your values is, I think, key to then seeing where you can go. And it sounds very rational of how to go about it, but I think it ultimately it sounds rational, but it feels, when you start walking the path, it feels right.
Absolutely. You just have to dive right into it and see if it's for you or not.
Exactly.
And what about travel? Like for example, has there ever been a place that has Fuerteventura, for sure, because you moved there, but before Fuerteventura, let's say, has there ever been a place that's really moved you, or has made you think or rethink or feel something that you've never felt before, or made you rethink about your choices, for example?
I think one thing. So for work, I traveled a lot to San Francisco, and there you obviously have certain spaces around there which have beautiful nature, absolutely beautiful. And so I went on a trip for a couple of days to Yosemite National Park, and that was absolutely gorgeous. It was so beautiful when you kind of enter. And a colleague of mine told me, when you drive in, you enter through that park, you will see this majestic kind of valley opening up, and I was like, yeah. And then we drove there, and I was like, oh my god, so much what he's thinking and what he's talking about, because you have this beautiful nature around you, like those cliffs, those hills around you. It's like makes you feel very small, and the waterfalls they have, those power, this energy that is there. That's definitely one space where I was like, okay, I really need to think. And like then it kind of really rather made me think, oh, I think I want to move to San Francisco. And I was kind of on the way there, already halfway, and then kind of had a bit of a think and then decided not to do that. But I already had initiated the path with my work so that I could potentially move there through my previous company. But that was definitely Yosemite National Park was a big one. And I've traveled to other spaces. There were, I think Cuba was another one, yeah, where I think just the way of living and how everything kind of played out there. I went with a friend who's Cuban and who was born there, stayed with his family for a while as well. So that was very interesting to see as well how society works there. And that makes you rethink as well. And I think there's a lot you can say about that. And I don't want to get into any political details, but I think one thing that I observed was people there, it feels like in general you have just time. I think time is something that was more there than I've seen in other places.
Do you think people were more in sync with how they were using their time, or?
I think that goes back a bit on kind of how the political system seems to work there, and how kind of this baseline. Yeah, I don't want to touch on that, but ultimately I think that reminded me that we all here, we hustle so much, we always keep ourselves busy. If you're not doing anything, it seems you're lazy or you're not kind of achieving. And I think, and this kind of reflects, like last weekend I had that moment again, it was just like, no, we just need to be in the moment, we just need to be here, we need to have time.
Absolutely.
And like today to get here, I was just rushing, and I kind of realized, I'm like, God, Svenja, just set this intention last week and that you really want to kind of stay more in the moment. Now you're just rushing through one appointment to the other. And so I think that's one thing, time. Just giving ourselves the time,
I think, but that's exactly like what capitalism made us do and feel in a way, like, like you have to be doing something. If you're not working, if you're not productive, then you're wasting your time. You are a procrastinator. You should be you should have invested like 10 hours in a day, and if you haven't done that, then why haven't you done that? So it's like ingrained capitalism that comes from years of working around that sort of an environment and the values also.
And this feeling of guilt that comes with that if you don't. And I think that's something where you can, when you can be your own manager in a way, and you can consciously decide how you spend your time. I think it's really beautiful when you can say, okay, today I actually need energy, because you only have a limited amount of energy every day, right, that you can spend on certain things. And then I'm like, okay, today you can spend a certain amount of time on the job, on the classes that I'm teaching, on the marketing I'm doing. And sometimes I have days where I'm like, no, I just need that energy for myself. I need to like work through things for myself. I want to develop myself a bit further. And that's a beautiful thing when you kind of live on an island like this. You're your own boss, and you can really kind of divide your time different.
But are there like, from your time working in tech and to now, are there some principles that help you in your current frame of work, in your current work environment?
I mean, I was a project manager. I'm managing quite big projects back then. I think one thing that helps now is to kind of juggle all those little different tasks. When you have like a little studio, there's so many small things where you're like, okay, how do I prioritize? I think prioritization is a big key. And I think another thing as well that I learned is, because I work with so many different people on like different seniority levels as well, to be very understanding and compassionate with people around you that you work. That sometimes you can get like kind of a bit annoyed or frustrated if things don't work out your way, and just be like kind of letting that go, and kind of being more compassionate around it, and like knowing everybody has their own struggles that they work with, and kind of letting that go. And I think distributing work so that I'm okay to not own everything I'm doing, but to be like, okay, there's someone who is specialized in that, who knows actually better how to do that. So why would I do it if I can? Obviously I need to pay for that, but then I have more time to do something else. And I think people who have not maybe worked in project management or like in a similar environment maybe, at least that's what I see in my environment now, struggle a bit more to kind of give up control and give up responsibility to other people and shifting that. But for me, I think project management work has helped me to be like, okay, but you're the specialist and that you should do that.
Right.
And I can spend my time what I'm actually good at. And so I think that's a thing that I learned.
That's perfect, because that's how you divide the work, and that's how you get a great team as where everyone does what they're good at. And
the trust, and trusting them that that's actually it's your responsibility. You do that. You're the specialist. Just tell me what you need from me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And where do you go to unwind? Is it in Fuerteventura? Are there any spots that are your favorite spots? Usually everyone has their favorite surf spots or something. Is there somewhere which is not your studio, for example? You're getting out of Cotillo, or even Cotillo. Are they your favorite Fuerteventura spots?
I must say, to be honest with you, like for me, like my studio is one of those spots where I just like go for my own practice. That's kind of where I really ground myself. Another thing is I get to surf quite a bit, but that really depends. I don't have like one surf spot where I would go, but that I love sunset surf. If I can go after a busy day, I go for sunset surf. I think that really resets everything. And actually, I have a little furgo, like a little camper van. I bought the one from my dad and drove it down here. And that's kind of, if I feel like everything's overwhelming, I get that little camper van and just drive, I don't know, 10 minutes, like I don't know, a couple of hundred meters away from where I'm living, and just leave on the coast. You hear the waves, you hear the wind, and in the morning you wake up. And I usually put my phone aside as well, so it's just me in the middle of nature. I think that's something you can't do if you're doing in a city.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I still need to do the furgo experience. I still haven't had it.
Have you not? How long have you been on the island now?
A few months.
Okay, there's an opportunity there.
But that's on my to-do list to do. But again, I'm putting a to-do list to go back into nature. No, okay, cancel.
Cancel that to-do, just be there.
But great, thank you so much for coming today and being our first guest.
Yes, you're welcome.
And if you want to do yoga in Cotillo, we have Svenja.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next episode with a new guest.